The Great Flood isn't just an ancient legend, it's one of the most devastating catastrophes remembered by nearly every ancient culture. The Bible tells of a time when the waters rose and covered the earth, wiping out all life, except for those who took shelter in the ark. The Sumerians spoke of Sudra. The Greeks had the tale of Deucalion. Different civilizations, separated by time and geography, told the same story. The world nearly drowned. And more archaeological discoveries suggest that it really happened. Geological evidence points to a sudden rise in the Black Sea's level around 7,500 years ago, flooding vast areas of land. In the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates, archaeologists found thick layers of silt covering ancient cities. Traces of a massive flood, recorded not in myth but in mud and stone. But what if it happens again? Not in the Bronze Age, but in our modern world, where billions live by the sea, where global trade, energy, and food rely on fragile coastal systems. What happens when the water returns, not as a metaphor, but as a climate-driven reality? In this scenario, we'll explore one of the most realistic versions of a modern Great Flood, grounded in scientific climate models, real-world vulnerabilities, and hard data. In early 2030, a quiet announcement is made by a coalition of climate research institutions. The Earth's average global temperature has officially reached plus 1.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The number itself doesn't mean much to most people, it's just a statistic, a figure in a news ticker between sports scores and market updates. But for the scientists who've studied the planet's systems for decades, it's a threshold that signals something deeper: acceleration. Within months, satellite data confirms what researchers had feared. The melting in Greenland, long described as concerning but manageable, has entered a new phase. Vast rivers of meltwater carve deep channels through the ice sheet, some disappearing into massive sinkholes known as moulins, carrying warmth down into the heart of the ice. At the same time, in West Antarctica, the Thwaites Glacier, dubbed the Doomsday Glacier by glaciologists, begins to show structural instability along its ice shelf. Sections break off faster than any previous model anticipated. By August, global sea levels have risen by 8 centimeters in just 6 months. By October, the number doubles, 20 centimeters in less than a year. More than the entirety of sea level rise seen between 1900 and 2000. A joint statement from NASA, NOAA, and the European Space Agency warns that key tipping points have likely been passed. They cite findings published in Nature Climate Change and reports by the IPCC. Feedback loops from permafrost thaw, weakening oceanic currents, and accelerated ice loss are no longer hypothetical. They're underway. The phrase irreversible collapse appears in official documents for the first time. But the message doesn't land. In coastal cities like Jakarta, New York, and Lagos, the tides creep just a little higher. Saltwater infiltrates freshwater supplies, storm drains backflow, suburban basements begin to flood during minor storms. Insurance premiums spike in Florida, in the Netherlands, in southern China. But still, world markets hold. The headlines move on. A few nations call emergency climate summits. There's talk of infrastructure reinforcement, of building seawalls, of relocating critical energy hubs. But the response is bureaucratic, fragmented, slow. Most governments assure their populations that models are uncertain, that we still have time. The public, already numb from years of climate warnings, mostly tunes out. Some begin to question whether the numbers are exaggerated. Others shrug and go about their routines, assuming someone, somewhere is working on it. But the scientists aren't warning anymore. They're pleading. By December, Miami experiences flooding without rain on a clear, cloudless day. It's not a storm surge, it's groundwater pushed upward by the sea from below. In Bangladesh, entire villages are evacuated after brackish water poisons rice fields. In Venice, the Meuse barrier system is engaged almost daily. In Tokyo, engineers triple-check tsunami defenses, not against waves, but against slow rising pressure from the sea itself. The Earth has entered a new phase, and it's moving faster than any politician is willing to admit. But in official statements, there's calm. Leaders tell the world the same line, over and over: the situation is under control. But by the time anyone realizes it isn't, the water will already be here. In March 2031, the Thwaites Glacier in West Antarctica loses its final grip on the seafloor. For years, scientists warned this could happen. But even the most aggressive models didn't expect it so soon. One morning, satellite data from ESA's Cryosat and NASA's ISAT-2 reveal what the raw ocean sensors already suggested. A massive ice shelf, nearly the size of Florida, has fragmented and collapsed into the Amazon Sea. The global reaction lasts only hours before attention shifts to the consequences. Sea level doesn't rise slowly now, it surges. Within 3 months, the world's oceans have climbed 1.5 meters, not centimeters, meters. From the Hudson River to the Mekong Delta, from the Nile to the Thames, coastlines vanish. The maps become obsolete almost overnight. What used to be a 100-year floodline is now the daily high tide. Cities aren't fighting against storms anymore. They're drowning under blue skies. Mass evacuations begin in silence. In South Florida, communities from Miami to Tampa are ordered inland, though many have nowhere to go. In India, the Sundarbans vanish beneath rising water, forcing tens of millions from their homes. In China, the Yangtze River Delta becomes a basin of brackish, shifting wetlands. Bangladesh begins what UN officials call the largest climate migration in human history. Over 200 million people are on the move globally by the end of the year. But this isn't just a humanitarian crisis, it's a geopolitical fracture. Nations close borders. Panic spreads across Europe as waves of displaced people arrive by land and sea. In North Africa, access to fresh water sparks regional conflict. In South America, internal displacement from collapsing coastlines drives rural tensions and paramilitary activity. The world food supply contracts sharply. Salinization destroys lowland rice fields. Trade routes are disrupted. Insurance systems collapse. Energy grids near the coasts go offline. The myth of global stability evaporates. News networks run continuous coverage, but the tone has shifted. There's no more speculation, no more panels of experts. Now it's footage, water breaching barriers in Shanghai, families abandoning rooftops in Kolkata, soldiers directing traffic on floating bridges in Louisiana. Every continent is affected. Every government is overwhelmed. Scientific institutions, battered by political pressure, release one final consensus update in November 2032. An additional 3 meters of sea level rise is expected within the next 18 months. The combination of Antarctic collapse, deep permafrost carbon release, and weakening oceanic circulation has triggered compounding feedback loops no longer considered reversible. The report includes a word that had been avoided for decades: uninhabitable. Nations begin selecting what to save. Relocation budgets are spent not on people, but on critical infrastructure, data centers, government archives. Some regions begin constructing vertical settlements far inland. Others begin shifting capitals entirely. Jakarta is abandoned. Bangkok follows. London's underground is permanently sealed. New York loses everything south of Central Park. The water keeps coming, and no one can stop it. By the close of 2032, half the world's population lives in states of emergency. The other half prepares for their turn. And somewhere beneath the headlines, a realization spreads. It's no longer a climate crisis. It's the collapse of the modern era. By the spring of 2033, the western Antarctic ice sheet, long considered the single most dangerous tipping point on Earth, reaches total structural failure. The Thwaites Glacier collapse of 2031 was only the beginning. Now, the Pine Island Glacier follows, triggering a domino effect. With their foundations destabilized, vast shelves of ancient ice accelerate into the sea. The last barriers fall not over centuries, but within weeks. By July, the global sea level reaches 5 meters above the pre-industrial baseline. Coastal cities that once planned for seawalls, elevated rails, and drainage canals now lie underwater. Entire metropolitan areas vanish beneath a gray-blue horizon. London, New York, Hong Kong, Sydney, Lagos, St. Petersburg, and Buenos Aires are no longer cities. They're memory markers on nautical maps. The skyline of Manhattan becomes an eerie forest of rooftops and cranes poking from shallow water. The Tower Bridge is gone. The Victoria Harbor lies silent. The collapse triggers the most rapid migration in human history. There are no more organized evacuations. People flee not by order, but by instinct. Air travel becomes chaotic and sporadic. Roads are jammed for weeks. Railway networks dissolve underwater or sabotage. Millions move toward higher ground, away from coasts and now also away from the equator. Because while the oceans rise, temperatures do too. The equatorial belt becomes nearly uninhabitable. Wet bulb temperatures in parts of Central Africa, northern India, and Southeast Asia exceed human survivability for hours at a time. Heat waves kill hundreds of thousands. Tropical disease explodes as mosquitoes migrate north. Dengue, chikungunya, malaria, once regional threats, now sweep into Europe and North America. Floodwaters stagnate, turning entire drowned suburbs into breeding grounds for illness. Cholera outbreaks, fungal infections, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria become as common as rain. On land, order collapses. Agricultural belts shift hundreds of kilometers north and south, destroying seasonal patterns. Crops fail in China and the American Midwest due to unstable rainfall and soil salinity. Famine looms. National currencies lose meaning as resource-based barter systems reappear. Governments redirect remaining military capacity toward defending mountain passes and water reserves. Inland towns, once forgotten, now burst with double or triple their former populations, straining sanitation, energy, and food to the brink. On the water, a strange kind of reinvention begins. Makeshift flotillas form from surviving fishing fleets, repurposed cargo ships, even retrofitted cruise liners. These become floating settlements, drifting between abandoned ports, searching for safe anchorage or food. New trade routes, no longer between nations but between survival clusters, emerge across the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Pirate activity returns. So do diseases of crowding and malnutrition. But in the chaos, some find purpose. Fishermen become leaders. Engineers become barter kings. A new kind of resilience appears, but it's fragile and it's desperate. By the end of 2034, the sea stands 7 meters higher than it did just 5 years earlier. That number alone doesn't tell the story. It doesn't show the loss of infrastructure, the disappearance of culture, the death of history written in the form of drowned cities and silenced languages. It doesn't show the silence in the Vatican, the empty halls of the Louvre, the echo of mosques and temples abandoned to rising tides. But for the survivors, one fact remains impossible to ignore. The world they were born into no longer exists. And whatever replaces it, if anything, will begin far from the shore. By early 2035, the oceans settle. After 5 years of relentless rise, the water finally stabilizes at 8 meters above the historical norm. Not because the crisis is over, but because there is simply no more ice left to lose. At least, not in the short term. The world has drowned to its new shoreline, and humanity, or what remains of it, now begins the long, quiet process of adaptation. No one talks about rebuilding civilization. That word, civilization, belongs to another time. The systems that once held the world together have fragmented beyond repair. There are no functioning national governments, only remnants. Pockets of surviving leadership, scattered across highland bunkers and remote facilities. Some former military units enforce order in what they still call zones. Others have become mercenaries, drifting between settlements and trading security for supplies. The internet is gone. Satellites fail one by one, either knocked out by solar activity, orbital decay, or simply abandoned. Fiber lines were lost with the cities. Power grids are limited to small microgenerators and improvised solar farms. Communication has reverted to analog. Shortwave radio, handwritten letters, messengers on foot. In the mountainous regions of Turkey, the Andes, central Ethiopia, and the Rockies, autonomous enclaves begin to form. These are not cities. They're clusters of necessity, tightly bound communities built inside caves, fortified on ridges, or tucked into valleys spared by the floods. They farm what they can on terraced land. They collect rainwater in hand-welded tanks. Electricity comes from salvaged panels and microturbines. No one speaks of restarting the world. They speak only of the next season, the next meal, the next storm. Currency means nothing. Trade is survival. Knowledge is power. In one enclave, a retired engineer with an intact hard drive of PDF manuals is considered more valuable than gold. In another, a midwife becomes the de facto leader of 100 people simply because she knows how to keep babies alive. Books become libraries again, passed hand to hand, memorized, protected from mold. Languages begin to drift, borders are meaningless. Time is measured in seasons and harvests, not months. In some areas, survivors cluster around the ruins of former data centers, energy installations, or remote scientific stations. These hubs attract a different kind of remnant, tech engineers, ex-researchers who believe some systems can still be preserved. They maintain hard drives in clean rooms, runs servers off geothermal vents, protects satellite dishes on mountaintops. But they are isolated, and they are few. Most of the world lives without maps, without data, without anything beyond the immediate. Humanity has become local again. The psychological impact is harder to measure than the physical. An entire generation grows up never having seen a city, never having touched a touchscreen, never hearing the sound of an airplane overhead. The stories they hear from older survivors sound like fairy tales. Electric cars, skyscrapers, airports, something called the cloud. They don't mourn it, they never knew it. Religions fracture and reform. Some communities reinterpret old texts in the light of the flood, weaving climate science into apocalyptic prophecy. Others abandon belief entirely, consumed by pragmatism. Most simply endure, gathering each night around fires to tell stories, sing, watch the stars. It is the beginning, it is what comes after endings. And all around them, the world breathes differently. The seas are vast and permanent now. Forests return in the absence of agriculture. Cities become reefs. Roads vanish under moss and silt. Without industry, the skies are cleaner than they've been in centuries. But that beauty offers no comfort. It is indifferent. By the end of 2035, there are no global conferences, no rescue plans, no miracle technologies. There is only the quiet realization that this is the world now. The flood didn't just drown cities. It erased assumptions about permanence, about progress, about control. And in the silence that follows, on mountaintops and islands and broken hills, small groups of people continue, not with hope, but with habit. Not trying to reclaim the past, but learning, one day at a time, how to live in what's left. The flood didn't come out of nowhere. It arrived fast, but not unexpectedly. The science had been clear for decades. The warnings had been issued, reviewed, published, ignored. There were conferences, reports, charts, graphs, all pointing in the same direction. And yet, no decisions were made. No actions taken at the necessary scale. When the ice began to break, there were still meetings. When the water rose, there were still debates. And when the cities disappeared, it was already too late to matter. The systems humanity had built, global trade, digital infrastructure, national governments, weren't designed for collapse. They lasted longer than some predicted, but not long enough to stop what was coming. In the end, those who survived weren't the wealthiest or the most powerful. They were the ones who had time to move. The ones who saw the signs and chose not to wait. What you've just heard isn't fiction. It's a scenario. One possible future among many, built on existing data, current vulnerabilities, and unfolding climate patterns. If anything, it's a restrained version of what could happen if nothing changes. So let's ask a simple question. If you knew the world had just 2 years before the flood began, what would you do? Dear friends, if you liked this video, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the new releases. Thanks for watching.